I never intended to be a side chick too. He was so surprised to see the wife with me. Without even hearing her out, he slapped her and she almost fell with her baby. I honestly felt bad and had to scream at Steve to stop because Kathy was a calm woman and had come in peace. Kathy wept uncontrollably, attracting my neighbors, but we managed to handle the situation appropriately. Steve was surprised because that was when he found out that the wife already knew about our affair. But not for once did she ask him about it. Initially, I expected Steve would go home with his wife, but alas, I was wrong. He instead turned to me and whispered that it was time we left. The wife told me I was also a woman and one day I would go through worse situations than hers. She literally cursed her husband and I, that it shall never ever be well with us. We left her being consoled the charity. Steve and I booked somewhere for 2 good nights. It was really amazing despite knowing what I was doing was not right. When the weekend was over, Charity had a serious talk with me to let Steve be. I agreed and could not contact Steve nor picked up his calls, for about a month. But deep down my heart I was troubled, my feelings got attached to an extent where I couldn't believe myself. I later on ended up calling him, I missed him like crazy and so did he. We were now in full swing, I didn't mind about who was seeing or met me with Steve. I still chose to go along with the situation because my happiness was what mattered the most. I started getting jealous whenever he mentioned the wife's name. Eventually I wanted top spot. At that time I didn't even realize I meant harm. Some months later, things started falling apart. I failed a course and was asked to rewrite before I could continue to the next level. I was often sick and only to discover I was also pregnant. I only had myself to blame. When I told Steve about the pregnancy, he sounded really excited and told me he would marry me. I was so excited upon hearing that. When I asked about Kathy, all he said was, "Old is gold." He intended to make me his second wife. At that moment I realized that indeed, it's rare that the side chick wins. I cried myself to sleep that night. Steve asked me to move to the servants' quarters and I gladly accepted. I don't know what was going through my head. I thought moving closer to Kathy would drive her crazy and most likely divorce Steve. But unfortunately, she made it clear that she would not go anywhere. Steve was her God-given husband. Kathy couldn't agree that I moved to the servants' quarters, so Steve found a 2-bedroomed house which I shared with my little cousin, Grace. Now that I had Steve, all the gold stopped glittering. In fact, I was just his mistress and he didn't even marry me as his second wife. It was boring staying at home and somehow I missed school. However, despite it being my final year, I couldn't continue attending classes. I was ashamed to be seen around the campus with a married man's baby bump. When I was 6 months pregnant, Steve lost his job and his wife took care of him. This meant he could no longer pay for my rentals. So the only option was to go back to my parents' house. I knew they would definitely welcome me, though I disappointed them big time. When I moved to my parents' house, Steve rarely came to see me. Our communication lessened and whenever we met, all he talked about was how grateful he was for having such an understanding and a good wife like Kathy. That really hurt. Men can change, I thought to myself. But, truth be told, I was the other woman, not her. I had no right to get jealous, and that was frustrating. Story continues.